Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, if you are a tech founder or a go-to-market leader right now, you already know the ground beneath us has completely shifted. The 2026 playbook is officially here. And honestly, those days of growth at all costs are completely over. We're living in a strictly outcome-driven reality now. If you want to scale today, especially in highly regulated sectors, the old playbook, yeah, it just won't cut it anymore.
So that brings us to a really critical question. What exactly separates the companies that are actually securing funding and scaling in 2026 from everybody else? Because let's face it, it's a brutal environment out there. Budgets are remarkably tight, buyers are way more sophisticated, and those procurement cycles, they've stretched out for what feels like forever. Success today fundamentally requires one thing above all else: undeniable proof.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our quick roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the 2026 tech landscape, then break down the three essential pillars of scaling. That's trust and compliance, capital readiness, and proof-led growth. Finally, we'll wrap things up by looking at the new marketing metrics and why outcomes drive the future. Section 1, the 2026 tech landscape, a shifting reality. Think back to the old era for a second. You could build a flashy dashboard, toss out a freemium model, and just watch the users roll in, right? Success was all about product-led momentum and spinning a feature-driven narrative. But 2026 is ruthless. It absolutely demands capital efficiency, proof-led outcomes, and trust-based distribution. Being different isn't about having cooler features anymore. It's about whether your buyers actually trust you and whether you can mathematically prove your value. Moving on to Section 2, Pillar 1, Trust and Compliance. These are absolute table stakes now. It's kind of staggering to think about, but there are over 365,000 health apps out there on the market right now. Historically, figuring out which ones were actually safe was like finding a needle in a haystack. So to cut through all that chaos, institutional buyers now rely on strict frameworks like the Digital Health Assessment Framework, or DHAF. You must demonstrably nail 4 specific domains: data and privacy, clinical assurance and safety, usability and accessibility, and finally, technical security and stability. Honestly, if your app doesn't hit these 4 pillars, institutional buyers literally won't even glance at your pitch deck. And this brilliantly illustrates how that exact same rigorous compliance applies to education technology. In Ed Tech, this takes the form of the CodeProof, FERPA, and COPPA endpoint compliance checklist. Protecting student data is legally mandated at the federal level, so platforms absolutely have to align their endpoints with these specific federal standards. No exceptions. When we actually break that checklist down, we see that buyers are demanding incredibly strict data minimization controls. We're talking about unique user accounts and multi-factor authentication for staff just to lock the front door. Then, you need enforced device encryption across all operating systems, plus per-app VPN so only approved apps can even touch protected services. And finally, a strict separation of school data from personal data on bring-your-own-device setups. Listen, this isn't just basic IT housekeeping. This is the non-negotiable baseline architecture of trust in 2026. Section 3, Pillar 2, Capital Readiness. How to actually survive due diligence. You are going to need a virtual data room, or VDR, and it needs to be impeccably structured. I mean it. Sending an investor a chaotic, messy Google Drive link, that is the absolute fastest way to kill $1 million deal. You want a beautifully logical folder hierarchy, starting with a company overview, moving seamlessly into detailed financials, then legal and compliance, and finally product and technology. Structuring your data exactly like this drastically reduces friction for the investor, and it naturally limits your data exposure during fundraising by letting you grant access step by step. The folks over at FirmRoom really hit the nail on the head with this one. Your investor data room is the final front line of your fundraising process, and that is so true. A secure, highly organized data room with role-based permissions is way more than just an administrative task. It is a competitive weapon for founders. It projects sheer competence and builds that exact trust we were just talking about. Section 4, Pillar 3, Proof-led growth, the modern go-to-market. You know, we used to rely so heavily on product-led growth. We'd toss out free trials, hope an internal champion would adopt the platform, and talk endlessly about our shiny new features. But today, buyers demand proof-led growth. They want hard evidence. That means you need clear ROI narratives, rigorous evidence of learning or health impact, and outcome-based case studies. Let me be clear, if your go-to-market strategy cannot clearly prove why your product matters to an institution's bottom line or academic performance within 12 months, it's just going to stall out. Section 5, the new marketing metrics. tying spend directly to revenue.
Now, what's really fascinating here is seeing the massive divergence in metrics between B2B and B2C models, particularly when we look at EdTech. To put it in perspective, an institutional B2B buyer might cost anywhere from $400 to $2,000 to acquire. Meanwhile, a B2C user is usually between $20 and $120. But track that all the way down to net revenue retention. B2B platforms typically see 100% to 120% retention, meaning their customers are actually spending more over time. On the flip side, B2C often struggles with churn, sitting right around 70% to 90%. You absolutely have to know which game you're playing to measure your success accurately.
To ensure your business model is actually structurally sound, investors will obsess over this specific ratio, a 3-to-1 up to a 6-to-1 target for lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. Basically, if you are spending $1 to acquire a customer, that customer needs to bring in at least $3 to $6 in lifetime value. If you aren't hitting that bare minimum 3-to-1 ratio, well, you aren't really acquiring customers, you're essentially just setting venture capital on fire.
Tied directly to that is your CAC payback period. For B2B platforms, the golden target is 12 to 24 months. That's exactly how long it takes to recover your upfront acquisition costs. And here is a major warning for you. If your payback period is stretching beyond 18 months in today's market, you need to seriously reevaluate your channel mix and conversion efficiency. You simply cannot afford to have cash tied up for that long.
Section 6. Outcomes drive the future, tying spend to retention. In the education space, it literally all comes down to learning gain. It's a simple formula, the post-assessment score minus the pre-assessment score. It measures the actual real-world educational outcome. So the crucial point here is that this is the specific layer completely absent from standard SaaS dashboards. Standard SaaS, it tracks logins and clicks, but outcome-driven regulated tech tracks actual human improvement, and that improvement is the absolute greatest predictor of your renewal probability. The data here paints a pretty stark reality. Accounts experiencing a learning gain greater than 20%, they renew at a massive 94% rate. That's huge. But accounts with a learning gain of less than 10%, they churn at 55%. Strong educational or clinical outcomes don't just feel good, they directly sustain your revenue economics over the long haul. Quite simply, if the product works, the business works. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought. Does your go-to-market system prove actual value before the demo even begins? Because you really can't just wait for the sales call anymore. You have to build a system founded entirely on credibility, undeniable proof, and long-term distribution. That is exactly how you scale in this new era. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you in the next one.